to this photograph, which was taken by Phil Willis. This famous photograph was considered of some importance because it actually shows the president during the shooting with the grassy knoll in the background. But its usefulness is diminished because that whole area is so blurry. But Willis said the reason it was so blurry is because he didn't mean to take the picture, that he had been startled by the sound of a gunshot into depressing the button on the camera, the shutter on the camera. So the Warren Commission asked the FBI to determine exactly when that photograph had been taken. It was subsequently determined that it was taken by lining up Zapruder and Willis, that the president's position conforms to about frame 202, which happens to be about the time of the second gunshot on the acoustical evidence. But the FBI claimed it was at 210. They apparently fudged the evidence to move it back to a position where the president was visible from this window. That's the first place that the president becomes visible. And this work was done by Olson and Turner and published in the Journal of Forensic Science, that it was actually frame 202. Well, Alvarez realized that the same thing would happen to Zapruder, that a large sound like that would startle Zapruder and cause him to jiggle the camera. Now, there have been at least 6 published blur studies that I know of, and you can see here that they're all in very close agreement in terms of when they detect the movement of the camera, even though they use different methods. Alvarez used angular acceleration. These folks for the House Select Committee use a different way of measuring the blur, and yet they still come up with about the same position of the blurs. The main difference is because when these earlier studies were done, the only frames from the Zapruder film available were in the Warren Commission's documents. Later, when the film became available, then they started seeing some other, there was some significant blur back at this position. But mainly there's good agreement, and particularly this corresponds to the Connolly shot and this to the head shot. And when we do some calculations, remember that 227, we were making an inference that the flap on the jacket was the time of impact. So if we look here, our jiggle, our major jiggle occurs here at frame 227. We'll now use our film speed. We have 18.3 frames per second, so that our film cycle is 54.6 milliseconds. Our refractory period, this refers to the time it takes between when your brain hears the sound and when you actually flinch. Now, that was a mistake that Alvarez had made. He used 6 frames, about 300 milliseconds. That's the voluntary reaction time. He used as an example, if you take a dollar bill and you drop it, you won't be able to catch it because you can't react fast enough. The startle reflex in humans is an involuntary reflex mediated by the brainstem, and it's essentially instantaneous. The only delay is the nerve transmission time from the brain to the muscles. The neck muscles, it takes about 12 milliseconds. The shoulders, about 15 milliseconds. I would think that would probably move the camera, but to get out to your hands would be 30 milliseconds, so I'll use that as an outside value there. Now, the sound path has to go 270 feet to get to Zapruder if the shot came from the book depository, and that takes about 240 milliseconds. Our trigger time, based on having to go that distance, therefore, would be at Zapruder frame 222. And if we shoot a Mannlicher Carcano bullet from that position to go 190 feet to Conley, it should take about 93 milliseconds, which means we should have impact at frame 224. Which is what the flap of the lapel shows. So we have very good agreement between the position, the acoustical position of the gunshot, and the flap of the lapel, and with our analysis of bullet flight time. So now I move on to final section is the recent article that came out a month or so ago by Linsker et al. And they start out by, there's no discussion of the core acoustical evidence in this report that just came out. Rather, they simply say, go refer to our NRC report because it has a wealth of detail and rationale. It's actually, the NRC report is replete with factual error. It misrepresents the core evidence. The statistical analysis was fudged, which I showed in my 2001 paper. Their appendix is full of other reasons why you shouldn't believe in the acoustical evidence, all, you know, the sirens and the position of the motorcycle, all of which is unattended by evidence or analysis. This new article argues that really it's the same argument that the NRC report made in the first place. It said that the sounds are not synchronous with the time of the shooting. And the way that you get at the synchrony of the time of shooting, remember, is those crosstalks, because you have places where you have simulcast between the two channels. So it ought to be easy to go back and say, okay, here's the position of the shooting and here's the position of the sounds, and see if they're the same place. And the first problem is, you know, okay, to get that crosstalk, the police were using two different channels. Their primary channel, channel 1, which was the routine police broadcast, was recorded on a dictabelt machine, which is that dictabelt that I showed you in the first place. There was a second channel that they used, which was an auxiliary channel, which was recorded on a separate machine, this autograph machine, which was used for the police escort with the motorcade. Now, it is the broadcast over the channel 2. The sounds that we've identified as gunshots are over here on channel 1 on the dictabelt. But over here is the broadcast from the motorcade. Now, since there are simulcasts between the two channels, we can align things. And when we align things with the crosstalks, we discover that the gunshots are precisely synchronous with the time of the shooting. And the reason is because of this. This is a transcript from channel 2, and I'll play it for you. Okay, the key broadcast in there, apart from where he says we're going to the hospital, that's the first broadcast to indicate now assassination has occurred. And that's the marker that Linsker et al., the NRC panel, uses as a marker to indicate time of assassination. They say, well, it happened before that sometime, which is true. But we can be much more accurate because we have this broadcast where he says he's at the triple underpass as our marker for the time of the assassination. I'll explain that. I want to point out that just 2 seconds before we heard this statement, I'm at the triple underpass, and actually the early transcripts, when you listen to it now, that "at" part is a little bit garbled. The original transcript said approaching. That's what they put in the transcript. It says, I'm approaching the triple underpass. I don't know whether he's at or approaching the triple underpass. He's somewhere close to the triple underpass. 2 seconds before that, we heard this police officer say the words, "I'll check it. I'll check it." Over on channel 1, okay, sorry, jumped ahead of myself. The reason we can use that as our marker, which is at the triple underpass, the broadcast is coming from Chief Curry. He is in the lead car of the motorcade. What you see here is President Limousines entering Dealey Plaza. That car is 40, 50 yards in front of the president. And here is Dealey Plaza. So if he's at or approaching the triple underpass, Curry is here, and the president, 40, 50 yards behind him,